Good evening and welcome to Season 5, Episode 12 of Inside the Rookery. We are joined today by Ed Silvester of the Starter Set podcast and fellow member of Lawhammer cast. Welcome to the show, Ed. It is great to have you here.
Hello!
Hello!
I feel like you need to, I want us to sort of do a car. You know what I mean? If it's inside the rookery, it's a car. It's a ah!
Or indeed, I'm sure Lindsay will demonstrate something for you later. But yeah.
I shall.
Right, okay.
And of course, I'm joined by my fellow Rook, Andy Leith, and we are here to talk today, Ed, about podcasting, tabletop RPGs, and anything around that our patrons have some pre-submitted questions on our Discord community. So, would you like to introduce yourself before we start, or shall we get into these really tough questions?
Yeah, you got the pyrotechnics and the fireworks and everything that I sort of put on the rider, right? You've got all that stuff set up and ready for me to do the intro properly. Is that true? Yeah.
You're just gonna have to do it yourself.
No, that's fine. Yes, hello. So I am Ed Silvester, and I am one cast member of the wonderful Lawhammer cast, which is where most of you will probably know me from. But I have also got under the old belt, I think it's about 5-6 years of running a Spit and Sawdust podcast, which has gone through a few iterations. It is what it is. It's Dungeons and Dragons. It's the old 5e stuff, right at sort of the beginning of the, I don't know, I guess the revival of what we saw, sort of that 2015 era where everybody and their mums is playing RPGs and coming back into that. And at least that's where I kind of got on board with all those things. And I think I started a little bit ahead where everybody kind of jumped back into that kind of thing. And it became more mainstream. So I ultimately sat there and wanted to get more people to play it. And out the back of that, I met a good friend of mine now, Sam, who we worked together, and basically he was a bit of a weirdo and I was a bit of a weirdo, and we kind of had a conversation together and we're like, hang on, we're both pretty weird but on the same level, like let's do something and make something. And 5 years from now, still going. It's slightly different in the way that it's going, but that's me. That's who I am, at least in relevance to this podcast. I'm sure if you have a conversation with my therapist, they'll tell you a lot more about who I am. But hey, that's where I am, and that's why I'm here. So
we met Sam, didn't we? So Sam was a pre-stream guest spot on Lawhammer, and we can confirm he is a weirdo, but also a total legend. So.
Yeah, he did. That was big impact, actually. That's when Lucas lost his eye.
Yeah, it was because of Sam.
Because of Sam. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That was good fun. It was good fun. Yes.
So let's get into the questions. So Caravan is up first. So what are the best entry points for starter set other than the very start?
Presumably this is the podcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, that kind of depends on your approach, because we recorded it in arcs, so which is great because then I can also go arc, and that kind of links in with our rookery element. So I'm happy with that. So you can kind of basically chuck in different bits of what you want to know a little bit more about. Now, I'm not. And the way we run it is like, look, it's two, and this sounds like such a I'm a white guy and I have a podcast statement, which I really hate, but it's basically two friends talking about a thing that they enjoy. But each arc is specific. So if you want to look at characters and you want to be a player and you want to figure out how to do that, like there's 20 minutes. It was meant to be little bite-sized, 20 minutes. Blap, you want to play a dwarf? Here's a dwarf. As a sort of standard kind of very like straight out the box, boom, there it is. And then with the back end piece slammed on, which is kind of like, here's maybe a few alternate ways that you might want to play it if you're sort of coming, if you're been doing this for a while and you want to see something different. And then we started to shift into the, all right, well, how do you approach this from like a GM's perspective? And we started talking about building a city. So one of the arcs is called Making a Metropolis, where we build the People's Republic of Equilibrium, which was a city. We got a artist in who drew up the city after sort of we basically hashed it out. And you go through the reasonings. Okay, why does this city exist? What's the local economy? How's all that look like? Where's the history from it? And I should point out, we do it in a way that is, and this is kind of the way that I approach D&D in itself, and probably quite not and this is how I approach D&D. Is I want to be doing a Saturday morning cartoon, right?
Mhm.
A He-Man where you've got repetitive bad guys, something's happening again. It's not too taxing, because for me, D&D and what it was basically an excuse for me to have set moments where, as I grow up and sort of come do that, that journey from being a kid basically, and like running through and growing apart and doing things different from your friends, D&D was a reason for all of us to make sure that we got together and we sat there every Wednesday and we had a drink, told a story, caught up with everybody, kind of, pressure points, fingers, make sure that everybody's kind of feeling okay, as you do in your early 20s. And and that's the way we kind of like to run it. And also it means that you can GM after a bottle of wine, because there's no massive impact, because you're running.
No consequences.
Yes, exactly. I mean, there's consequences, but it's that sort of like slapstick, and you can kind of get anybody to say anything, and it can become canon within that area. The worlds and things that we kind of played in quickly became, we started in Forgotten Realms, but it very much quickly became our own thing that we'd all chucked stuff into, and it was a bit more Discworld, and the cities were a bit more Ankh-Morpork and stuff like that. One of the suggestions was that the we had an environment where basically there was a king, there were multiple people who looked like the king, and the actual legitimate one was found out because somebody suggested, hey, their blood could be blue, because obviously you've got the royal legacy blue blood kind of thing, and we were like, yep, sure, fine, done, let's run with that. And that's how we kind of, the guys all figured all that stuff out. So I've forgotten what the question is. When's the entry point? It depends on your approach. It's really light touch. If you look at the first kind of arc in the series, that is pick up a different arc, Making Metropolis, World Building Wonders, Enchanter's Corner, or the races, or all the classes. Like, you can literally pick up and choose which DVD you want, kind of thing. And then that kind of shifted. So we got to the end of like, here's how you teach people to play, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we got to that end of that. And we didn't want to, and I've seen this with multiple different other content creators, they get to the end of the thing that they want to do, right? And they're going, we've still got an audience, we still want to do this, maybe like they make a bit of cash or whatever, and they are just flogging that horse till there is just nothing but a carcass. And you can feel it, and you can see the deadness behind the eyes, and you're sort of going, are we doing this again? All right, fine. So we paused for a bit while we figured out the next stage of what we wanted to do. There was a Marvel RPG on the way, and me and Sam were big comic book heads, and we were quite excited for that. We got the preview book. Andy, I think you've had a look at that as well. It's not great. I don't know what the rookie stance is in terms of suggesting other things, but
you can. I mean, like we know and love Matt Forbeck, who wrote it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we are blind to the potential complexities. I haven't seen the finished product. From what I understand, the finished version has changed quite a bit from the previous.
Okay, good. Well, yeah. So basically, we said, right, we can't hang a podcast up on this. So we were like, okay, well, we'll keep that in the back pocket. If something comes along, we find something out, then we'll do that. And then this comes back to my other entry point, and then our next entry point hits in, which is live play or actual play. I don't know what it is, because it's not live play, is it? It's recorded. So
Actual play,
which was something designed one-on-one, so one DM or GM and a player, and that was Beowulf, basically, which is a game designed literally for one-on-one. And we figured, right, that's our dynamic is the thing. We know our dynamic was the thing that was the bring to the show. There were better people out there doing the stuff that we did, but we understand that actually the people that are watching it or listening to it and enjoy it, what they're enjoying is the dynamic between myself and Sam. So then it transferred into Beowulf, and we've got a full season of that. And then Sam has basically had a family. He's having a really nice time, but he wants to commit his time to that wholly. So he's departed from the podcast, which is fine. And there's zero animosity or anything like that. I need to establish that. And it was like, okay, well, what do we do next? And I sort of wandered around. And then I was like, do you know, my wife fantastically suggested, well, why don't you do it with your brother? Because going back to the reason why we do these things, it's to keep in contact with the people that we love and have a reason to have a conversation, basically, right? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So now it's myself and Ollie, who is my younger brother, and we get to hang out basically once a week and pretend to be running around sort of 5th century Britain-esque, but not Britain, but also could be.
That's where I've started, and I can confirm it is a good entry point. So even though it's the second kind of season of Beowulf, and you refer to the stuff that happens in the first, I quite like that, because it's like picking up a book with like a plucky young hero in it, but that world already has had stuff happen in it. So I'm enjoying it. I've picked it up there.
I haven't had a chance to start on the second series yet, but I do have one very minor spoiler question for you, which is, does Ollie ever go full puffin?
So no, Ollie does not go full puffin. I think full puffin is very much that was weird. That was very much Sam's approach. Which there's a prime example of hey, if you say it, we'll try and shoehorn it into a game, right? And that's what we did.
So Kerevin also asks, are there any WFRP rules like corruption that you think D&D should add?
Loads. There's absolutely tons. So I love thing I enjoy from WFRP is the initiative piece. Mm-hmm. I think that's bloody brilliant. Just that's your initiative. That's all it is. That's done. It's so straightforward. It means that when a fight kicks off, you're in it. And a lot of the time, narratively, you go, all right, roll for initiative, and everybody rolls a dice and does maths for like a minute, and it kind of loses the impact. You've described, like, I don't know, a giant dragon who smashed through some walls and spit acid on several people. They've melted into skeletal, grotesque figures of themselves, and then they strike, look towards you, inhale, roll for initiative, and then you have to think, okay, right, what's +2? Okay, cool, I've got this, and you know what I mean? And so the fact that you can just go straight in, love that.
The visual aspect of that, I think, organizationally for a GM is really helpful as well. Having people sit in the order, so that it's like you go, then you go, then you go. Now I go, now you go, now you go, like that.
And we didn't used to sit in order, did we, Andy? We started sitting in order for Lawhammer. Maybe we'd done it a few times before, but we'd never done it as a rule.
We did it our previous the previous time we started the Enemy Within, because we had new players and we thought it would help them.
Right. Nice.
Okay.
Yeah, like when we were sitting around your sofas.
Okay. Yeah. Seagoat says, I loved your attitude as a creator when you got Sam to create the Metropolis. When Sam came up with a random idea, you ran with it. And also Seagoat says Saturday morning cartoons are the best. And just on that idea that you wanted to recapture of cartoons, like we've talked about that on the stream before, that when I started role playing, I was really quite young, and so to me there wasn't much difference between what we would do like playing D&D and what we would do like in the playground pretending to be Star Wars or like Princess Leia or Indiana Jones. And that to me was always like the the joyfulness of kind of like taking those properties and those cartoons, and then we read like the Thundercats. It was quite lucky I went to a small school because there wasn't very many girls parts, but there was like 2 of us at the school, so it was all good. Yeah, and you could kind of like imagine yourself, and but in those cases you would like replay the stories you'd seen on the screen and then kind of like make them bigger and longer. And so role playing was a really good way to then learn how to create your own stories. And we've got a question on that, and I thought we could go into that next. So Paul Kerr asks, what's the best way to start D&D? My son, 9 years old, is interested, but it seems complex.
Okay, cool. Yeah, good question. Because that is the one that sort of I get asked a lot. And it depends. I would say it depends, Paul, on your knowledge of how it works already or not. Because the thing, okay. First of all, I cannot suggest our podcast for a 9-year-old because
so I was going to say the same thing, that Andy Law does a really nice thing with emerging complexity and explaining Lawhammer and Wifrip, and so I would recommend the phrase emerging complexity. Yes. But I would not recommend Lawhammer for your 9-year-old.
No,
is your starter set podcast the same, Ed?
We drop the expletives left, right, and center. Just use them as punctuation, ideally, really. But in answer to your what's the best way to start D&D? Yeah, emerging complexity. That kind of sums it up better, I suppose, because you can take it back to the base thing and go, right, no stats, no sheet, no nothing, and you can just sit there and you can tell a story and then interject with like, okay, what do you think this person should do? And what you're doing, what we're doing there is you play your own adventure storybooks, right? Mm-hmm. And then you start adding in basically things that can tell you the outcome of something, right? And those things are usually dice, they might be cards, something else that basically goes, look, this stat and this number suggests more how you interact with the world, right? But saying that, 9-year-olds, I mean, kids in general, I miss being a kid because I used to be so fucking smart, and now I'm just like fighting through a malaise of my own conversations and my own thoughts, trying to get just words out and figuring out what things are happening. Do you remember when just you had a new concept arrive in front of you and you'd sit down to be like, yep, get it, done, easy? I think we don't give kids, especially when it comes to D&D and things like that, kids enough props, really, in terms of like their ability to take that on. The only thing to manage with, and I don't think this is based upon role playing, I just think this is in general, is as a kid and then going into your teens and like basically all the way through your 20s and probably, screw it, through the entirety of our lives, we are figuring out how to interact with other people, right? You're primarily stretching and figuring out those muscles of interaction as a kid and as a teen. That's where you get that bigger stretch. You know what I mean? That's where you start to really stretch and figure out how you should interact with people properly and like what would be good at a table. And the idea of like loss and losing, and you can start figuring out how to deal with that. Because, as a 9-year-old, I know the way I operate as a 9-year-old, I would, if I lost anything, I would have just had a tantrum and cried, probably. You know what I mean?
And Seagoat's put a suggestion in: best way to start D&D is the starter set and just roll with it. What does a 9-year-old want? Complex multi-level plots? No, they want smash and grab treasure finding or smashing fun times. And that's what I kind of meant by emerging complexity. You don't, like, I think the worst thing you could do is, if you don't know the rules, sit down and learn them all and then sit down and explain them to your 9-year-old. Like, if it really depends, if you, Paul, are also starting at the same time, that's a different question than if you've done it already. But there's actually lots of quite good like intro stuff for kids now for D&D as well. And Nisgard makes a good point, which is I got into RPGs through HeroQuest back in '89 at age 9. Maybe start somewhere with a bit board gamey with added story elements.
So that's how I came to D&D.
Mhm.
Like that was the journey. Is I played Descent Second Edition, right, which is board gamey. It's a board game RPG. That's what it is. And then blap straight into the step into D&D. And I say straight into, I lie. I was broke as anything, and the starter set was £15, and other board games were more. So I was like, right, well, that's cheap. I'm going to buy that, and I started playing it basically.
Well, I think like you say, Lindsay, it's not like if you're teaching someone a board game in order to play them, you kind of need to explain all the rules so they understand how to play that board game.
Yeah.
But with an RPG, like they need to understand in the same way that as a games master, like when we talked to B about doing West Marches games, and he talked about having it loosely sketched out around, and he only coloured in once he knew where the people were kind of going. Like I think the same is true with rules. Like as long as you, the GM, know what's going on around it, you only need to explain enough for your players to understand. Are they playing a wizard? No, they don't need to understand how magic works then. Are they playing a wizard? Yes, they do need to understand magic. That is a rule that I will explain to them. You know.
Yeah, Andy's done it. Andy's done that with me a few times. So you'll see in the background those like Doctor Who. They were all like characters of mine. They're one Time Lord in their different incarnations, and I didn't even know we were playing. I was playing a Time Lord, or we were playing Doctor Who when we started that. He just sat down one day and was like, "Do you want to do some role playing?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And it just, I'd lost all my memories. I think I was that one, and I just like turned into, what's the word, regenerated into that one in the corner. And so didn't know anything, and every time I made a decision, it was a decision. He would say, right, you can be X or Y, and I would make a decision about what I wanted to be, like as a character, but also how I would interact with things. And as I interacted with things, he would bring in the dice rolls that I would need, and he would say, right, well, for this, you can solve it with, I'm talking in simple terms here, Paul, like you can solve it with science, or you can solve it by hitting it. Which one do you think your character will do? And I'll be like, oh, solve it with science. Okay, do you think she's going to be, and what Andy was doing yesterday, Andy Law, who's not here, okay, is that one of your basic skills? Are you all right at it, or are you an absolute specialist at science? And then if I said, right, I want to be a specialist at science, then that would create the number for us, and we would get on. So I wouldn't suggest that with a 9-year-old, but that's the kind of idea that you can do. You start with a story and you bring in the system as you go.
Yeah, that's similar piece in terms of how you can interact with the world is like, how people sometimes come with a pre-prepped backstory and all this sort of stuff. And like, imagine trying to introduce that and going like, that's the first thing you have to do is go away and like write up a character. And if people have no idea of what that is, like, as we say, a 9-year-old or a kid or anybody who's not played an RPG before, that's like massively daunting. But if you go, listen, as we go and play through here, I'll introduce you to parts of the world, and we can basically fill out your backstory as it happens. So if you meet someone, you can be like, I know this person. Or let's say we have an interaction with an organization. You can say, oh, I used to be part of that organization. Yeah. Or I'm quite high up in this organization. And then your GM or your DM or, you'll say, yep, sure, that's fine. And you can start to just glue it all together into a strange...
Yeah, I probably wouldn't do that with 9-year-olds because they might want to be good at everything and high up in everything.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, they're just like a genius, a little genius.
Yeah,
but you can do the classic thing of the
like this or that, as Andy did. Yeah, tells you a lot about me because Andy had to do the choice thing with me, like whatever.
But you do, like, it is right. Like, I remember the younger group of kids at my school who were setting up D&D. The girl who was running it decided that she was going to homebrew her world, and she was like, "My magic system's really simple. There's just going to be there's 5 elements." I'm like, "Okay, 5." And she's like, "Yeah, the earth, air, fire, water, and cheese." I'm like, "Okay, sure, you've got cheese wizards in your world. Okay, why not?"
Yeah, that's just solid milk.
Yeah. And I did what, like, but again, she was just too young for me to mention Misfits. But there was somebody in Misfits with the power to manipulate dairy, and I was like, you could actually do some interesting things with that, but no. Yeah,
that's where my head went to as well, because that episode is like, oh god, that is actually pretty terrifying.
Yeah,
what you can do with cheese.
Yeah.
Seago asked this, but I think we covered it. To starter set is D&D focused. If you played any other TTRPGs apart from D&D with Lawhammer, was D&D 5th edition your first D&D experience, or did you begin with earlier editions?
Yeah, so I'll answer the last question first. So yeah, 5th edition, my first experience with RPGs. Other RPGs that I've played, 10 Candles. I love a bit of 10 Candles. I don't know, like, just because. So I really like the little micro ones, because you can just pick them up and go, kind of thing. That one I just enjoy because we do, you know, when you do the little recording, your little recording to yourself that you're going to do it, and then you play it back to yourself at the end. Oh, that was good. However, I will have an open window or something outside, because that room got so hot when we were playing it. I remember it was pretty horrific. What else have I played? 10 Candles.
Have you played Blades in the Dark? Out of interest.
No, I do want to.
Because it sounds like, from what you were saying about your side, it sounds like it would exactly fit the style of collaborative world building that you really like, because it's very much designed around that. So
yes, yeah, that's what I've heard. Yes, so I do want to play Blades in the Dark. I actually recently bought a starter set to another RPG, which I can't remember the name of, because I got absolutely hooked by targeted marketing, and something came up, and I went, oh. I watched 30 seconds of the video of the ad. This is so awful, actually, now that I'm saying this out loud. 30 seconds of the ad video, and I went, yeah, I'll drop 40 quid on that. Boom, done. Didn't have anything going on. It's just horrific how quickly I did that. What have I played? I played the Dune RPG recently. That was a lot of fun, which is the sort of roll below. It's a D20 system, but it's not the D20 system from 5th E. It's you want to roll below your stat kind of thing, similar to I always have to say it like that. It just seems weird the way. Yeah. Yes is the answer. There's a fair few.
And Lore Master Sotek has such a large question, it's kind of almost drowned you, Ed. You're like, glug, glug, glug. What would be your advice when introducing new players into a roleplay setting, especially if they have notably different play styles? So balancing not only they're new, but having a class clown alongside a more serious player, alongside someone that really needs to be coaxed out of their shell when roleplaying. That's a challenge I've often seen GMs, especially newer ones, struggle with.
Whoa, that is a biggie. So as the class clown, I don't know. Introducing new players in the role playing set. So this is what I suppose this is what I'm talking about in terms of the social, stretching the social muscles, right, and figuring that out. And as a GM as well, having that conversation and figuring that out, that is part of stretching those social muscles, and that's the challenge.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, if you actually, I've got a prime example. My good friend Tommy Two Shoes Toner, who you had on.
We did have Tom on recently.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago. So Tom is his mind is incredible in terms of the stuff that he can think of and like create. Is just like it's out there and it's huge, but in terms of running a game and doing that stuff, because he spends all of his time world building and kind of living in fantasy and sci-fi, when he came to play D&D, he was like, this is my chill out space where I don't have to think about sort of consequences and being and whatever, and to a position where like he became class clown, to slightly more extremes.
More extreme than you, Ed?
Yeah, yes. So we were speaking giant once, and he decided that giants spoke the way that Banjo-Kazooie speak to each other. You know, in the N64 games. So he was standing up and he was going, I'm going to communicate with this giant. And he stood up for about 5 minutes, just went, because that's the sort of conversation, if you remember how those worked, because they only have a certain amount of audio storage in the old N64 cartridges. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. But what it meant is it kind of threw like story, and it threw kind of everybody else's immersion just a little bit out there. It's likely that you're going to be playing with friends. Realistically, it's likely you're going to be playing with friends, and if you can't have that conversation at that position, like finish the session, you know what I mean, and then like just call them up or sit down and have a chat.
It's like a social contract, right? It's like going out to the pub, right? If you're going out to the pub, your friends, you know what kind of level of madness that you want to enter in when you go to a pub. You know whether you want them to start jumping over canals or racing trolleys down a dual carriageway, or whether you just want to go to the pub for a drink. Actual life happenings there. But like it's the same kind of thing. So if you know your friends and you're in a group of friends, then you kind of know what kind of role-playing experience you have. I think the challenge comes when it's people you don't know as well, or when there's people from different age groups who might have a different understanding. Like the kind of role-playing game I would play if we were playing with friends and they brought their 12-year-old along, I would have really different expectations for the level of seriousness that we would have in that game in terms of some of the themes, but also the way we approach the game. And you can do that with a session 0 as well.
Yes.
Sorry, Andy.
I think as well, like, because I think there's two separate things there in Sotek's question. Like there's the social contract side of things, but then also the idea of coaxing somebody out of their shell. Like that's a big thing. But I think the biggest pitfall that GMs fall into with that, and actually with a lot of the problems that GMs have, is thinking that the GM has to be the ultimate gatekeeper and arbiter of everything. Like, it's okay to delegate some stuff. And if you know you've got someone, particularly if you're playing with a group of friends, if you know that one of your friends is less likely to come out of their shell and spontaneously role-play in character, but you've got other people who are more confident, then you just quietly ask them to engage with the other person in character and try and have that conversation with them.
And we learned a lot about that when we were starting the streams. But actually, the stuff that we've learned in Lawhammer is really good practice for just role-playing in generally. Andy Law, our GM, shouldn't have to tell us to share the limelight, and he shouldn't have to tell us to share between each other. We try to naturally pass things over. So something comes to one of you and you feel like, shit, I've been talking for a while. You'll just turn to one of the other characters and do what a normal human would do anyway and ask that character. So I think the mistake like you say, Andy, the mistake GMs make is thinking that they control the group when actually they're kind of just the facilitator for that group. But also forgetting that you're playing like actual like humans. Well, maybe not humans, could be elves.
It's sorry, Ed.
No, I think that a lot of the time we've seen and we've experienced, and for a lot of new players, they've seen and experienced, because we have this, like what we're doing now, and we have content that people can go and absorb and go, okay, this is how it's done. We forget the G of RPGs, that it's a game. Yeah. Realistically, like it doesn't matter, and you, I don't know, if you can't get through any kind of position where somebody rubs you up the wrong way, that you have to kind of kick off with them, like maybe look at yourself a bit there, because it's a game.
And with the notable exception of diplomacy.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are things that last for a long time, and that rage can just be brought back up again. But
it is a game. It's a game.
That's the key thing that I think people forget, that realistically, like, these things are games, and it's the same as like football. It's the same as a sport. Like, you have people that behave terribly in all sports and social interactions. It's in cinemas, it's in like concert halls, it's at gigs, it's in the pub. And like I've said, these are somewhat formats to stretch those social muscles and figure that stuff out. And that's maybe one of the things that you have to stretch and figure out is how do I, either figure out how to manipulate this or move it in a certain direction, or do I just ask someone to leave? And there's nothing wrong with doing that.
But another good idea, which I really liked from what you were saying earlier in the stream, to introduce to new settings, is to describe the kind of experience that setting will be. Like, so is it like an old-fashioned D&D Saturday morning cartoon? Or is it like in Warhammer, you're at the edge of midnight, 5 minutes to, and it's apocalyptic, and it's going to be grim, and it's going to be dark, but in Withrop it's lightened with that like really silly humor. So it's a game of contrasts, right? Or is it, I don't know, RuneQuest, which to me was always really like my chance to play a pixie, or an elf, or like a really high fantasy game. Like, what is the setting? What is the feeling that you want? And if someone's like, oh, I'm really not into, I don't know, whatever it happened to be, then either you as a group say, well, you know, we can stretch that a bit, or you say, well, actually, let's not play in this setting. Like, let's play a different system or a different game.
Or let's play, because
like,
again, because we're the anomaly, I think, Lindsay, you and I, because we almost exclusively play decade-long campaigns with Andy. Like, most people don't play campaigns that long. They play, so you can say, we'll tell you what, we'll play this for 6 sessions, and then we'll play something, you know. I'm going to just give a little shout out to James, who was meant to be with us, but is having Wi-Fi related issues, so could be with us today. But his gaming podcast, Ludonarrative Dissidents, if people haven't checked that out, they absolutely should. But he talks, or they rather, him, Ross and Greg talk about that quite a lot when they're looking at specifically some of the specific games. So I've just been listening to their Delta Green episode, and they're sort of specifically talking about how it occupies an interesting moral space where you're kind of invited to be almost like a bully, but for the greater good, and explore that complexity, but that some people might not like exploring that complexity. And so for the right group and the right group of people, that's a really good and interesting and thoughtful experience. But you know, you know what it is you want. And Greg was comparing it, because it's essentially a horror game, to horror movies. And like, there are people who like horror movies and they know they like horror movies, and so they watch horror movies. And there are people for whom horror movies are a hard nope. And I think as long as you are clear with the genre that you're playing, like, you know, of the word, like, are you playing a happy-go-lucky, you know, sort of Saturday morning cartoon? Is that the tone? Are you going for a PG-13? Are you doing a hard R kind of horror movie? Like, what is the genre in which your game is operating? So,
yeah.
How can anyone survive for decades in a Wifrit game? Well, that's another story.
Decades of real life. I think it probably only covered about 3 years in Warhammer.
No, it did not. It covered decades.
Did it?
Yeah, 100%. Anyway, we digress. The other one we did for decades was a vampire game. That's much more easy, because we literally covered centuries. Yeah. So there's a link to the podcast. Let's have another question for Ed. What got you into the GM chair? Like, why do you like GMing?
Oh, good morning. That's my GMing. I think probably like a lot of GMs, you're the first one to introduce the idea of this to other friends, basically. I for quite a while, I was the sort of forever GM, and this is another thing that I'll get into in a moment. But you know, and while we were figuring out how to play and do all this sort of stuff, and what is a bit weird and what's a bit balmy, and I did find myself, I found myself being overly protective of the idea of the story and getting a little bit dicky in terms of like, no, you can't do that because it does this, and then you sort of look at yourself and go, oh yeah, it's a game, and I shouldn't get to the end of the session and feel frustrated. I should feel like I've had a lot of fun with my friends. So I've gotten off topic almost immediately from this question. What got me into the chair? So I think I've highlighted this already. I for a long time was like, I'm not playing RPGs. Absolutely not. No, silly. Imagination, get out of here. But I did play board games, right? Because they were kind of you set it up, you do the things, and then you play it, and then you're like, brilliant, I've jangled some dice, I've moved a thing, and somebody's a winner, and somebody's like whatever. I just didn't get the idea of a ongoing thing that lasted, that runs as a story and doing all that kind of stuff. Because it is conceptually, we don't really discover that as anything else. And a lot of the time when you speak to people that do RPGs and stuff like that, it's like, oh, you can do whatever you want. That is such a terrifying thing to hear. I know. I have listened to my own podcast. It is absolutely ridiculous. Thank you, Seagoat. Yes. So started on the board games, and basically was real. I was just broke as anything. and my monthly thing was I'd go and treat myself to a board game, and I'll buy myself a board game or whatever, and I go into my local board game shop, which this is like how like there wasn't really anything to buy back then, because I was buying them from Waterstones, which I don't know if it's just UK centric. Is Waterstones UK centric?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so Barnes and Noble, right? That's the equivalent, probably, that everybody knows collectively everywhere. So they in Bath, and they had the tiniest selection of board games or whatever, and also they used to be a bit hiked up in terms of cost as well, because they want to make their
and
cash.
They were also like a very specific type. We used to like talk about them quite disparagingly, like the Blackwell's board games or the Waterstones board games. They weren't like they were either ones that were really well known and people had, or were just like, I don't know, something licensed, like
licensed
a shit Sherlock Holmes game,
something Cluedo.
Yeah,
Star Wars Cluedo, blah Cluedo.
Different versions of Monopoly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And those, do you know what? Those games have got a space. They do. I mean, some of them are not as good as the experience that you can have board gaming, but if people are excited to do those things and you love those people, just get involved with it and be like, okay, that was great fun. Do you want to try something else maybe afterwards? Like, yeah, there's some really, I mean, Andy, you've got a gateway game right next to your head there, Ticket to Ride. If you want to like break people into the whole idea of board, that's a classic. So yes, and broke as anything, wanted to treat myself, couldn't afford anything else, and the Warhammer D&D starter set was £15. And I was like, right, there we go. Bought it, opened it up, got quite disappointed because I was like, there's not much stuff that I can jingle jangle here. And then stayed on my shelf for about 6 months. And then I was like, do you know what, let's try this. I think I watched one of the what are the guys called? This is back when Chris Perkins was DMing for the Acquisitions Incorporated lot, when they were playing 4th edition, just like on that turn from 4th to 5th, watched one of those and was like, okay, that was enjoyable. Let's go and see what I can do. And then I pulled out the 5th edition starter set and cranked into it. And now I'm actually more of a player, I think, than a GM, even though I do GM on the podcast. I don't know, half and half.
Here's I'll just bring up a few comments. So Sage says, I use movie genres as a vibe setting thing too. I think that's quite a good suggestion. Seago is a forever GM, so loves when someone decides to run a game and they can join in.
Yes, that brings the thing that I was going to talk about that as well. So I was forever GM for quite a while, and it was sort of, that was the set thing. And then I had GM burnout, basically DM burnout. You know, when you sort of like, and I was talking like, it gets sloggy, and you're like, I don't have any ideas. Oh God, okay, I'm just gonna have to like just balls to the wall, try and figure this out as we go along. And knowing that I wasn't very good, I just said like, look, guys, I'm knackered. Does anybody want to do it? And then luckily one of the guys that said, yeah, I'll have a crack. They had a crack at it, did a one shot. Then we went back to me doing it, but that then gave them the confidence to kind of go like, oh, I think I might have a go. And lo and behold, he was a DM for 2 years for us, where I then played a wizard called an alias. And everybody was like, what's your name? And I'd be like, it's an alias. And I loved it. Yeah.
So here's a question from a fellow Lawhammer customer. Dan, why are your arms so small?
It's the camera's far away. That's what it is. It's a matter of perception, Daniel. No, but do you know what? This weirdly ties into somewhat of a concept of who I want to be and represent within the board gaming world, and like doing this stuff is and again, this was so much worse maybe about 5 years ago, where you'd speak to somebody and you'd be like, I'm into board games or I'm into RPGs. And I say 5 years ago, and also the history before that, right? It was guys in basements with neck beards who are like, don't have any social skills and, you know, are terrible people. Well, not terrible people. You know what I mean? Just
that was the stereotype.
Yeah, the stereotype was that. And part of me was, the idea was to break that. And when people would go, oh, what do you like doing? And I go, this. And they go, okay, that's not, you don't look how I would
Yeah.
think that, and you can talk to people relatively well. So like fitness and the gym and like doing that stuff is a part of who I've decided that I would like to try and be. I don't know if I'm doing that. I don't know if I've got to that position yet, but it's the work in progress.
Well, Dan doesn't think so, clearly.
Yeah,
So
yeah, no, I know. That's because Dan.
That's
because Dan is a jealous man.
And I can confirm that you bang on about the gym all the fucking time. So yeah, you're definitely doing that.
I do not. I am very conscious of doing that.
You don't see the private chats Ed and I have about the gym, so you don't know how much he talks about the gym.
All I see is the public chats, and I think there's too much of it. So just say.
But this that comes from a comment, I think, from Kath's goddaughter niece, who said something about my arms, and which is why I've set up the camera in the way that I've set up, because I'm really self-conscious now.
But was it not something nice about your arms that they said though?
Yeah, she said something lovely, but Dan doesn't want to let it go, basically.
Poor Dan. Anyway, we should stop talking about him because he's not here. But he did bring it upon himself by asking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You open the gates, he comes for you.
Yeah. So Caravan asks, across all games, what do you think is the best starter set? And Master of Sock Puppets says, and why is it Wifrup? I believe you've got the Wifrup starter set, don't you?
I do, yes. So I've got 2 starter sets. Those are the only starter sets that I actually have.
And which is the best, Ed?
Bearing in mind the people that are in this chat with you right now.
I know. So I have got 2, and this is difficult because I can't really say that I've read all of the Woof-Rup one.
Well, and so you shouldn't have, because there could be spoilers in there.
Yeah, exactly.
But in terms of opening it up and finding things in it that you were excited about.
Oh, right, yeah. So the content in there is fantastic. And not to I like a map, right? And this isn't to blow Andy's horn or anything like that. I think that's not what I wanted to say there, is it? Yeah. Yeah, the maps in that are fantastic, and I use them on a day, like when we're streaming. I use those regularly because whenever we're talking about Ubersreich, just being able to go, okay, that's there and that's near that and all that sort of stuff. It's so much easier to figure things out and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, exactly. So that
correct answer.
Ridiculous. Yes.
It is a true collector. His Wifrup starter set is still unopened. It is not. It is.
Yeah, no, it is open. I have opened it. I did spend some time. I have got other RPGs that are on the shelf that I really need to like crack into and read and properly. Vaesen. I've got Vaesen as well.
Oh, nice.
Yes, which I just bought because of the art. I just thought the art in that was just gorgeous. Yeah. I basically picked that up and I've yet to play that game as well.
Let me bring up another question while I fetch something. Just so Seagull asks, why make a podcast? What do you think your podcast brings to the table?
Oh, now that is this is like opening up a coffee shop near other coffee shops, right? Because it's not exactly a new concept, the idea of a D&D podcast and things like that, especially when you've got people out there who are doing it so well. I'll tell you what I think the USP of our podcast is. And it is, and I've sort of mentioned it, but it is the interaction between myself and whoever's playing. It's not the idea of I'm not bringing like mind-blowing like voice acting skills. I'm not bringing ridiculous story that are so complex and all over the top. And this is primarily on the actual play pieces. What I'm talking about there, and then the learning to play stuff. There are other people out there again who are doing that so much better when it comes to like, hey, you want to play a monk? Like this is how to play a monk, and this is the way that you can put those stats and use it in a way that will do things. I mean, admittedly, it's kind of approaching the idea of playing these games as a min-maxer and winning D&D or winning a role-playing game, which isn't necessarily what you want. But I mean, we've got there's stuff that we've done in there that our listeners in our Discord like talk about that we have forgotten that we've done, and it's where we've gotten really weird. We've got a character called Great Mandibles who has just got giant teeth, and he's got great mandibles. He's just a halfling. He's got just a huge set of gnashes on him. I don't know where that came from, but he's got a voice, and Sam does that, and that's usually he turns up and has a conversation. We've got just silly. What's that spell is like a little mini game that we play where I'll basically, while Sam was learning the game, I was describing a spell like by its effects, and he would have to then tell me what that spell was called and try and figure that out, which was always really fun.
I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's like I could become obsessed with that and like just for no reason learn all the spells in every game that exists and make people test me on them, and then I would be like, can I go on Mastermind with this special skill? And people would be like, no, you cannot. And I'd be like, well, fuck, I've wasted my life.
Yeah. Why? It's selfishly. I'll tell you why I've got a podcast, because I'm a selfish man, and I wanted to spend time with friends making something. I think that's it, basically. Yeah. What does it bring to the table? You can listen to it if you want, but I'll probably keep cracking on and doing it for as long as I feel like I'm enjoying it, and it's up to you.
So
one USP that I think you do have is there may be other ones out there, but as far as I'm aware, yours is the only one that is like two people, like one GM, one player.
Yeah, that's probably true. Oh, what, as a actual play?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that is probably true. And that is because we knew that our USP was is me and Sam, or it's me and Ollie, basically.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting, because I think it's a way of playing RPGs that some, like a lot of couples perhaps do, but it doesn't really get spoken about a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
If you didn't see, that is so Vason, check out our stream with Johan Egerkrans, and that is some of Johan's art which inspired Vason.
I've got a printed boulder up there as well.
Norse
which
Gods is one of his books. Amazing.
I need to get a frame for that, actually.
Lore Master Sotek says, what's your favorite weird roleplay moment you can recall? While you're thinking about that, Ed, I didn't realize that a side effect of Lawhammer, our actual play stream, was that I could listen to Andy Law's voice wherever I go now.
Yeah, which is nice.
It's vastly improved my quality of life.
I mean, it's good for you, but if I do that on my own podcast, that is just the equivalent of audio just jerking off, basically, isn't it? Realistically, it's awful.
I can't believe how much I listen to him. I'll be like, right, I'm going to Leeds, 3-hour train journey. What can I do? I know, I'll listen to my husband for 3 hours.
That's a good position to be in, realistically. A lot of people would say, oh, good, I can't listen to my husband for 3 hours. That's, very positive experience. Yeah, very much so. Weird role-playing moment I can recall. Weird. Now, weird's interesting. I can remember I tell you what, I can remember the most like fun / stress / just balls to the wall barmy is we were stuck on an island where which was basically fantastical Vietnam, where the locals are all halflings, but they were being somewhat repressed by automatons who sounded like Cybermen. So I was just doing a lot of noises. And then there's also flying ships. Sorry, because I enjoyed Spelljammer, but Spelljammer hadn't been released, so I was just like, I'm just going to make this my own. The world is like continents that are all held together by big lodestone chains, and there's a miasmic field that all of the ships kind of fly around on. I also massively steal from just other bits of lore because it's a home game and I can just do that and it's not a problem. So, and I always tell people to do that. Like if you see something cool in a book or something like that, just fucking steal it. Which is what I've done there, because I think that's the what are they called? They have really good art. It's a series of books. Oh bugger, I forgot what it is. It doesn't matter. Again, going off concept. We basically got to a position where I was running 3 battle maps, which was one stuck on a wall because I didn't have enough room in my flat. So I stuck one on a wall with blue tack, and that was the overview of the ships. So the ships were like going around each other like big naval combat, and the cannons were shooting each other. But the bad guy ship shot black oozes. It didn't shoot cannonballs. It shot black oozes, which then just like through like all the gantries and started attacking the crew. So then obviously you need a battle map for that crew. So then we had another table like behind me, which had the battle map for the crew. And in the meantime, a separate portion of the team were underneath a old temple fighting a spirit naga to turn off the controller for all the robots, the controller that made them all do the things. So the big power switch, which then goes boom, and they all go and having also the ship, the big ship, the big bad guy ship was controlled by a ooze called Jubilee X, which is like a big, if you know your D&D lore, it's a big like ooze king kind of thing, and also just like the sound of it, Jubilee X. So that's why he was firing out other oozes to things, and then he enveloped his
wow, Ed. The implications of that right there, slightly creepy, not gonna lie.
Well, it's fine, whatever. Yeah, just firing the kids at another ship. Don't worry about it. And then every so often he would encompass his own ship and cloak, which is always fun. So, and basically it was 4 hours, and I got to the end of it and I was so sweaty, and everybody else around was like, it was just so much fun. And then, and I know that's a good session because my friends still talk about that session, and that was about 5 years. No, that's probably too much. About 4 years ago that we did that. So I'll always remember that because it was a culmination. I always have a problem with that word. It was the finishing point of an arc of part of this story, and that was one of the bad guys that can return, because in this, so they're called the Cabal of the Undying, are the collective bad guys that can always return. So spirit nagas, they can come back. Vampires obviously can come back. Rakshasas can come back, provided that you do all the stuff enough to get them coming back. Yeah, it's good. It's fun. It's just daft, but silly and fun. And that was a good one. Yeah, there you go. There's that question answered.
Nice.
I think.
Hi, someone else in the chat that also listens to Andy Law because she finds his voice maybe not reassuring, right? Same.
Yeah,
Listen to him all the time. Right, let's go for one last question. We've got 3 minutes left.
Uno mas.
What's this? Actually, this will be a really quick question. So, the Starter Set podcast, was that your first podcast, or had you been doing podcasting in different like realms?
So I'll try and do this quickly because I know that I begin and then talk. Not my first time doing a podcast. So Sam had a podcast beforehand, which was a interviewee type podcast, right? And he would find interesting people and bring them on and then have a conversation with them. And obviously we've been hanging out at work. I'd started talking about D&D. Weirdly, this is my career in D&D, is going to different places where I've worked, finding one or two people, corrupting them, and then they become, more role players. And
that's literally how you get players, right? Everyone,
yeah, basically, right? That's how you do it as an adult.
Yeah. You go in, you drop a few code words, you see whose ears prick up, and you go,
who responds
I found my people.
Yeah, who responds to me dropping some Lord of the Rings quotes and things like that. Yeah. So he asked me to come along. I came along and did that conversation. And then we finished it and he went like, that was really good. We should do this. And that was the thing that spawned it. And so, no, I've not done any other podcasting. I have, however, did study creative music technology, which doesn't sound like a real degree. I will agree that it doesn't sound like a real degree. But that then set me up to know what to do in terms of doing the whole recording thing. What I will say, though, if you want to do a podcast yourself, it couldn't be easier these days. And the barrier of entry is so low, that you can just... It's like, what, 100 quid maybe to have a crack in? It's so easy. Just go for it. If you want to do something, find a niche. That's a key thing. And So find a niche and start talking about it. And when I say a niche, I mean like a proper niche. So D&D is too broad, basically. But going like, and this is an idea that I've had for the kind of like a next show or something, is going, if you could have one spell, what would you use it on? And you can cast it maybe 3 times. How would you use it within our real world? And, you know, what would be the impact of that? Which I thought was quite interesting. Yeah, exactly.
You know, I struggle with acronyms. BBEG.
Big bad
evil guy.
Oh, right. Okay. And Josie went to uni and dropped only code words until she found the right people. We taught her well.
Yeah,
nice. I'm so proud.
Is that also just the board game code words? Just going around and dropping on the floor in front of people. Yeah.
That's brilliant. On that note, we shall bring our stream to an end. As always, the time has whizzed by. Thank you so much for coming on, Ed. As always, it is an absolute riot of a time having a chat with you. And we didn't get through everything, so please do come on again, and maybe you can bring some of your other cast members on and we can have a chat with them.
Oh, that'd be fun. Yeah. Love it.
Lore Master Sotik, thank you so much. We will. And until the next time, all that remains for me to say is thank you so much to all our patrons. We couldn't do this without you. Thanks to everyone on the Discord community and in the chat who make it such a cool place to be and such a great job for us all to have. And until the next time, caw-caw, caw-caw. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.